Hi, my name is Andy Young and I'm one of the automotive lecturers down at Unitech in Auckland, New Zealand, and I tend to make a number of videos covering workshop tasks. Primarily for my students, it helps them to get an idea of what it's all about and what each particular workshop task entails. Having a video, they can watch it over and over again, which is far more helpful than just a one-off in the workshop. So today's mission, so to speak, is we've got a couple of Nissan Patrol front calipers to strip down and inspect. Obviously we're going to have to order a couple of new seal kits for them and no doubt probably some new brake flexi pipes as well. But we're going to show you how to pull these apart, the proper way of pulling them apart, and what needs to be inspected so you can determine whether or not the unit's going to be serviceable and what parts need some attention, maybe the sliders, that kind of thing. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so the first job is we're going to pop the calipers into the vise and we're going to remove, we're going to use some jaw protectors. And we're going to remove that brake flexi pipe. Now at this point in time, these calipers are probably full of brake fluid, old brake fluid. We don't want to spill it over the bench, so we're just going to remove this first and we'll find a container to tip it into. There we go. Now this is called a banjo bolt and it should have, in theory, and the vehicle these came off hadn't been very well looked after, to be honest. Yeah, there we go. It's got a couple of copper sealing washers and you can see one there. And those have to be replaced whenever you reassemble these things. So we'll make sure we get rid of those. Pretty cheap, get them from any kind of store. Okay, so once we remove the brake flexi pipe, we can now drain out the brake fluid. This just, well, when it's old, it's not too bad, but new brake fluid is pretty bad for paintwork and stuff, so we need to just make sure that we don't get that into contact with too much stuff, especially painted surfaces, that kind of thing. Okay, I was expecting slightly more than that, but okay, there's some interesting stuff coming out of there, which is a bit of a telltale, so we'll cover that very shortly. Just stick that back in there and I'll take the bleed nipple off. That might actually help the fluid to drain out, but I don't know if you can see that or not, but maybe you can't, I don't know. Okay, well, maybe not. Inside the fluid, and you can see this inside master cylinders sometimes as well, very black deposits suspended in the brake fluid. That's basically the rubber seals within the system that are breaking down, and you're getting tiny particles of rubber suspended in the brake fluid. Now, hydraulic brakes work on the principle that the hydraulic fluid isn't compressible, so you get a nice firm pedal. If we get particles of rubber suspended in the brake fluid because the rubber seals have, deteriorated over time, that rubber is compressible. And even though those particles are very small, there's lots of them, and it actually will give you a spongy brake pedal. Sure, there's no air in the system, but just having those particles of rubber in the brake fluid can give you a spongy brake feel. It is really important that every couple of years that you do a full brake fluid flush and you replace it all with new brake fluid, and that will actually help to preserve the system. It'll stop corrosion with the system, but it'll also give you a really good brake pedal too. Much better than you would have if you had old fluid in there. One of the biggest issues with brake fluid is it's hydroponic. It attracts moisture from the air, so you must always use brake fluid and store brake fluid in sealed containers. You should really use a new sealed brake fluid container whenever you're topping your car up. If it's more than a couple of months old, and if the lid's been left off especially, then you've got a big problem. There's going to be quite a lot of moisture in there. Okay, so brake fluid lesson out of the way. Let's move on, and we're now going to pop the piston out of this caliper. Now, on this particular caliper, we're quite fortunate. It makes life a lot easier when the fitting for the flexi pipe is on the back of the actual caliper. We can use a punch in there and we can just pop the piston out that way. Another way to do it is to use compressed air. However, one of my father's mechanics, actually, back in the UK, he unfortunately broke a few of his fingers by putting his hand here while he was popping the piston out. It's not a good idea. If you're going to use compressed air, and quite a few people these days have a little air compressor at home, You can create a seal with some rubber or a rag and use your blowdown gun to pop the piston out. What we will be doing later on when we reassemble these is I'm going to show you how to check for correct piston retraction before you refit the caliper. If you don't have proper piston retraction, then you're either going to get a brake pedal that's quite low if you've got too much retraction, or if you've got too little retraction on the piston, then you're possibly going to have the brakes binding on. So it's always a good idea to check once you've reassembled the caliper just to see how much retraction you've got on that piston. The retraction is controlled by the coefficient of friction between the main square section seal and the piston itself. That main square section seal, which we'll be seeing a bit later on, it deforms as the piston is pushed out. The elasticity of that square section seal, because it wants to become a square again, that's what pulls the piston back in. It's got nothing to do with the fluid, nothing to do with any kind of pressures or vacuums or anything like that. It's the seal that's responsible for retracting that piston. And if it's too dry or it's too lubricated, or lubricated with the wrong lubrication, maybe somebody put CRC spray on there or whatever, then it's going to cause that piston to retract a different distance to what it should do. Now times that by 4 calipers on the car, and that's going to make quite a big difference at the brake pedal. Okay, so first job is to remove the bleed nipple, double check there's no more fluid in the caliper, and then we're going to pop the piston down. Okay. It's always good to remove the bleed nipples now because, again, they're quite often blocked and they need to be cleaned out. Now, a good way to check that the bleed nipple's clear is if you just blow down through the hole, don't touch it because it's got brake fluid on it, but just blow down the hole and then just open and close the output there. You'll hear a different noise if there's airflow. There we go, can you hear that? So we know that that's clear. Easy. Okay, a bit more brake fluid to come out then. See if we've got any more in there. Oh, there we go. Excellent. Oh, it really is black and gloopy what's going out of there, so I expect these seals to be pretty deteriorated, to be honest with you. Okay, back into the vise again. Nice and tight this time. And we need a punch. So I'll whiz and get a punch and a hammer, and we'll get that piston popped out. Okay, so we're going to be using a hammer and a punch. Now, this is fine when the connection, the banjo connection for the brake pipe is on the rear of the caliper, the piston chamber, because we can punch straight down onto the piston, no problems at all there. Doesn't matter if we put a few little marks on the piston, it's irrelevant. Hey, we might need to replace it anyway. If, however, the connection is on the side, which is sometimes the case, then this isn't an option. You can't use this technique to get the piston out. You're going to have to use compressed air. And what I'll do for you is on the second piston that we stripped down, for the other side, we'll pop it out using compressed air so you can see both techniques. Okay, so here we go. Hopefully what we told you is good. Don't forget to wear eye protection. I usually do. Okay, so you can see the pistons now coming down. Almost there. Might need a longer punch. There we go. Cool, I think we're about there. Let's give it a go. Okay. Looks like we're almost there. Okay, so improvised punch. Don't have one quite long enough. Give it a little tap. There we go. That's all we needed. Just a little bit extra. Okay, so you see that okay. We've got Mr. Piston. There he is. And now we can give it a wiggle and that's going to come out of there quite easily. Okay, cool. And you can see the minor dinks that we made on the back of there. Not too bad, you can see that all right. Quite serviceable, makes no difference. Okay, next job is to remove the seals. Now, the first seal is the dust seal. Now, quite often that's retained with a metal clip. Just got to find out where that is. And we usually use a scriber for that, so I'll whiz and get a scriber. Okay, so with these main dust seal, or with the dust seals, these ones are just basically trapped in a groove. Once the piston's in place, they can't come out. There's no steel circlet ring to hold them in place, as there often is with caliper main dust seals. This one's going to need to be replaced because it's got a great big rip in there. You can see that. Okay. Now, the job of the dust seal is exactly what the title is. It's to keep the dust and any contaminants out and off the piston surface, and certainly away from the main seal. It is in no way designed to retain brake fluid. If you've got any kind of leakage of brake fluid, it'll be the main seal that's failed. Okay, so if you look inside there, that's a bit hard to see, I'm doing everything left-handed here. There is a second rubber seal. Now the dust seal sits in this groove here, and this is the main square section seal. It's quite easy to get out. Just pop your scriber in behind it and just give it a little tug like that. There's a lot of rust behind it, which is a problem. I'll explain to you why. There you go, look, so there's your seal coming out quite nicely. Perfect. Okay. Now, when there's rust and contaminants in that groove, if the camera's going to focus for us, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. There we go, look. So, when there's rust and contaminants in that groove itself, it essentially puts more pressure on this square section seal against the piston. The groove essentially isn't as deep as it should be, and it causes this seal to grip onto the piston too hard, which therefore causes the piston to retract a different distance to what it should do. This rubber seal also feels quite hard. The rubber's gone pretty hard on us, so we're going to be putting new ones of those in there. Okay, so we've removed both the dust seal and the main square section seal. And now all that's left to do on this particular caliper, we've already taken out the bleed nipple, is to basically give it a good clean up, remove all the contaminants, and there's plenty of them, especially now we've removed the seals and stuff. Okay, remove all the contaminants from inside the chamber, make sure it's nice and clean, get all the cobwebs and bits and pieces. Yeah, it needs a really good clean out. And again, with a scriber, you want to make sure that those grooves are really well cleaned out and that there's no corrosion and so on. So when we fit the new seals, they will sit right back and properly seated into the grooves. And the main square section seal isn't going to provide or have too much pressure on it against the piston, because that will affect braking as well. Could cause the brakes to bind on. Okay, that's that one done. The pad carrier, which is what the caliper bolts to on this particular vehicle, it's got a floating caliper, same as that RAV4 that we worked on, similar idea. Let's take the pads off, we'll be fitting new brake pads as well. Get rid of those. Okay, so now with the pad carrier, it's essential that this caliper can slide, it can float. Because what happens is when the piston's pushed out, it pushes the inner pad against the brake disc, and then the whole body of the caliper moves across, and these two claws here are what apply the pressure of the outer brake pad against the brake disc. And it needs to be even, otherwise it's going to cause the brake disc to flex. And most brake discs are made of cast iron, and cast iron doesn't flex too well. It can cause them to crack eventually. Plus, of course, if the sliders are seized, it's going to give you a spongy brake pedal. Now these are the sliders. Oh, that one's pretty free, and that one's not too bad as well. So these should be sliding quite freely. We're going to take those out now. And again, they've got dust seals on them, so this one's already ripped, so this is going to need to be replaced. Just flick that off its seat. There we go, look. Okay, so a bit of grease still in there, which is nice. And we'll just remove that rubber boot off there. We're fitting a new one of those. And then we're going to give that a proper clean up, make sure it's all nice and clean, no old grease on it. Now sometimes the sliders are different top and bottom, so you need to make sure you keep them in order. Big bit of cardboard on the workbench and a pen just to label everything up is a great idea, real simple. I get my students do that all the time. Yes, sure, okay, so this one is different. There we go. First time I've done one of these. So on that one we've got a stepped slider. Look at that. So quite different. So it's not going to be possible to get these the wrong way around, which is great. Once you've cleaned them all up and you've removed all the grease from both the pad carrier, those two holes, and the sliders, pop them back in without any grease on to feel the play. If there's too much wear, that'll be indicated by excessive play. Then what's going to happen is the whole caliper is going to jiggle up and backwards and forwards like that in a rotational motion. So when you apply the brakes, it's going to kink across at an angle, and that's going to cause the brake pads to wear in a tapered fashion. Now that also can happen if one of the sliders is seized and the other one's working fine. Again, you get tapered pads. So it's a good idea when you're stripping the whole thing down, have a look at the brake pads and just see if they're evenly worn at both sides. So you've got the same thickness here as you do here. Okay, and if you do, then it's an indication that the sliders have got similar resistance at least. Hopefully, very little. Okay. So that's the first caliper stripped down. They really are easy to do. We're going to start on the second one now, and I'll use the airline to pop that piston out, so beware. There could be a loud bang. Okay, so Nissan Patrol front caliper. This is the second one that I'm stripping down. The first job is to remove the old brake flexi pipe. No doubt I'll be fitting a new one of those. These vehicles now are like, it's the old Nissan Patrol GR. It's the first of the coil sprung ones. With the wide wheel arches. These brake flexi pipes are pretty old. They're going to want to be renewed anyway when we reassemble the whole units back on the vehicle. So to get those off, we've got a banjo bolt. Just give it a crack, and a bit of brake fluid. And inside there, we should have. It's been assembled correctly, which it has by the looks of it. Yeah, there we go. We should have a couple of copper washers. Now these copper washers are really important because they create the seal. Now in a hydraulic brake system like this, under full braking, there can be up to 2,000 psi of brake pressure, pressure within this brake fluid. So the seals and copper washers and so on, or the banjo bolts, must be in really good condition, otherwise we're going to get some leakage. And that's one of the little copper washers. You see that okay? And that's going to have to be replaced. And there's two, one on either side of the banjo fitting. You see it's still on there, is that one. Okay. Cool. Okay, next job is just to crack off the bleed nipple. There we go, just loosen that off. And then we can get our trusty container. Take it a bit higher up so you can see better. Now, hopefully you're going to see the condition of this brake fluid that comes out, because on the last caliper it was in really, really bad condition. So let's just try and do it nice and slowly for you. I'm taking the bleed nipple out as well at the same time, so we get it's easy for it to drain it out. Now what you're doing is you're looking for blackness in the fluid. Oh, this one's pretty good. The other one was really bad. It had lots and lots of. Well, there you go. Look. So all that blackness essentially is contamination, and some of it is from the seals themselves breaking down. That's the main square section seal, the one that holds all the fluid back, and also the one that's responsible for retracting the piston as well. The deformation of that seal is what causes the piston to come back, because the seal wants to retain or regain a square section. There we go. That's all the brake fluid out. Now, what we're going to do for this one, the first one we used a punch, because on this particular caliper we can. You'll see that earlier on in the video. But now this time around I'm going to use compressed air, which is the second method of removing the piston out of the caliper. And one of the methods that you need to use if the fitting is on the side of the chamber, not at the back. Which at the back it's really cool because then we can use a punch to punch the piston down. Make sure your punch is long enough. If it's on the side, you've got to use compressed air. I'll show you how to use compressed air on this one. Okay, so here we go. Just grab an old rag. We need to be able to seal, a reasonably good seal, between the blowdown gun and the casing of the caliper. Now, as you can see, that's the port there. I'm just going to pop in the bleed nipple, just lock that off because we need it to be a sealed chamber. Compresses down to pressure, which is good. Just lock that off. There we go. Okay, so pop that on there, and that should get a good enough seal. There we go. Can you see the piston? Yeah, you can see the piston. Now I've put a rag down here just to act as a bit of a cushion in case it comes flying out really fast. Whatever you do, please don't put your fingers under there to hold the piston. The amount of force that's going to come out with is tremendous, and as one of my father's old mechanics found out, if you put your fingers under there, it can break your fingers. They can come out pretty violently. So here we go. Whoa, there you go, look at that. Pretty much there. Okay, so we'll give it one more go. We're almost there. And we'll give it another pop. Just pop the back under there again. There we go. There we go. Well, hey. Fantastic. Right. As you can see, you don't want your fingers under there when that happens. And just pull back the dust seal. Get rid of that rag. And then we can withdraw the piston, and you can see there we go, one piston is out, and we'll talk about pistons very shortly. Okay, so dust seal to remove, and then main seal again. I'm just going to flick out that bleed nipple now that we've finished popping the piston out. Get rid of that. There we go. Okay. So, dust seal time. Now, with these ones, it's just, you can just pull it out. Once the piston's been pushed in, it's the piston that prevents the dust seal from coming away. So you can't remove the dust seal until the piston's out on this particular caliper. Most calipers have a wire ring, a spring ring, that holds that dust seal in place. These calipers don't have that, so you can, now the piston's out of the way, we can just pull that seal clean out of the groove. There we go, very rusty. And that dust seal, unlike the other one, although it's going quite hard, it's going to get replaced, is actually in better condition, which does tally because the piston looks slightly less corroded as well. So there we go, one dust seal intact, but it will get replaced anyway. Okay, just run it down the back of the seal in the groove and run it round. And there you go, one main seal out. Square section main seal. Okay, so again, that caliper now is completely stripped, just needs a really good clean, get rid of all the contamination and so on. And it's also really important, like just like with the other one, to get all the rust out of these grooves. Now the main seal is pretty good, there's hardly any contamination in there, which is great. But where the dust seal sits, there's quite a build-up of rust, and if we don't remove that, it's going to make it a lot harder to get the new seal, the new dust seal to sit and stay in place when we refit the piston. So give it a really good scrape out, get rid of all the crap. So we've stripped down the second caliper, we've just got the second pad carrier to strip down now. That's pretty easy, we'll just remove the pads, get rid of those. They're in pretty good nick, although they're old, so we're going to put some new ones in anyway, so get rid of those. Get rid of the spring clips. And all that's left now is to remove, see if we can mount it a bit different for you this time. There we go. Be careful with these because they're only cast iron, and if you put them in the vise, don't over tighten the vise when it's being clamped in a strange position. So we've got the sliders. Now, the first thing to do is to check, well, that one's moving, in fact that one's moving very freely and it's got heaps of play. That's a problem actually, that amount of play. This one's seized up, so that's also a problem. Okay, well, we'll remove the free one first. Oh, golly, okay, that looks terrible. Just seal out of the way, and we can compare that one to the one off the other caliper and see what's going on, because there's way too much movement on that one. Yeah, very strange. Okay, so these two units should look the same, and they don't. This one is different. It's got a little thing on the end of it. Looks like it's come out with the bush. So we pop that in that hole. Yeah, that one's all good. And that one, nah, it's really worn, is that? And I have a sneaky suspicion, yeah, that it's the actual casing itself that's worn. So unfortunately, this pad carrier is going to need to be replaced. Yeah, this is not serviceable. Hey, let's just pull off the other slider and see what's going on in there. This one's all seized up, so we'll give it a go. Just see if we can get it out like this. There we go. Wow, rust. Okay, so this one was seized up due to lack of lubrication. As you can see, there was a great mountain of dust, rusty dust that came out of there. It's always good when you're doing real videos and not staging stuff. So there you go. Not too bad. I'm sure that'll clean up really well. Shouldn't have a problem. But the problem we've got with this particular unit is that, well, that side of this pad carrier is extremely worn. It's become overlated, and that could be a direct result of this slider being seized. So what's been happening is the caliper has been pivoting around because it can't slide out. The two sliders are operating parallel, so it's been running around in an arc. And over a long period of time, that's going to cause this to wear excessively. So unfortunately, this is going to put a stop to our current session. I'm going to need to source a new pad carrier, or maybe we'll just use one of the original pad carriers that's on the vehicle at the moment and just clean that one up. We've just got to bin this. Yeah, so we can carry on with the calipers. Okay, so we need to have a little look at the pistons now and see if these are going to clean up or whether we need to replace them. Now, Nissan caliper pistons, the original ones, are actually pretty good. I mean, don't forget, these things are 22 years old. They've done really well, though. It's not bad at all. Everything, any corrosion beyond this lip here, so anything in this groove here and outwards, is really irrelevant. It doesn't matter too much, okay? It's just cosmetic. It doesn't make contact with the main square section seal. However, all of this, pretty much all of this does. Maybe the last couple of mil, depending on the particular vehicle, doesn't, but everything else all the way in needs to be in really good nick. And if it's not, if there's any pitting or scores, little dents, anything like that, corrosion, where the coating's flaking off, anything like that's going to cause instant damage to that main square section seal, and you'd need to replace the pistons as well as the seals. Alright, so first job is just to give the piston a quick clean round with a wire brush. It's not going to cause any harm to the surface as a wire brush. Get it all the way around, focusing really on the groove where the dust seal sits. Oh yeah, it's looking pretty bad. Okay. So you get the idea. You want to clean the whole thing up using a wire brush. Now, what you're looking for essentially is any kind of damage, corrosion, pitting, whatever it is, that's going to render that piston not serviceable anymore. As soon as you spot some of that, there's no need to continue to clean it up because this piston's going to go in the bin. If you a pointy stick, if you look on here, I know the camera's not fantastic, but I think you can be able to make it out. You see these little marks here? Well, that's after I've wire brushed it. And oh, there's a really good one there, look. Okay, maybe you can hear it as well. That's where the actual chroming, these have got a chrome surface on them, has worn through, and you can see the rust underneath. Okay, now sure, I could get some really fine wet and dry, you know, and I could give it a sand up, give it a clean, make it smooth, you know, do what you shouldn't do, and it would probably work for a while, but it's going to rust again, especially as soon as that's exposed, as the pads wear, it's going to get exposed to a damper environment, and it's going to damage the main seal. So, you know, yeah, it's pretty bad all the way around actually. This is the piston that had the damaged dust seal. This is the one from the right hand piston, the right hand caliper, and of course that hole there, look, will have allowed contaminants, moisture and so on to attack that piston surface whilst the vehicle's on the road, especially when, you know, when the pads are a bit worn down. So it's going to need a new piston on this side. So a quick scan to the side. Okay, now this is the piston from the side that had the good dust seal. So let's give that a quick whiz around with a wire brush as well and see if that's in better condition. Okay, so I've not done the whole piston surface, I've done the area that's exposed the most, and immediately I can tell that the piston is in far better condition than the other one. However, unfortunately, it's still got some corrosion there. Look, you can see that or not on the camera. There you go. Oh, there you go. You can see that. So there's one spot on that piston where the chrome has broken through. It's corroded through, and we've got pitting. Okay, there's a couple of minor ones as well. So to recondition these two calipers, we're going to need 2 new pistons, 2 new piston seal kits, and some new slider seals. Yeah, and of course we can't use one of the pad carriers because it's been badly worn on one of the sliders, one of the holes where the slider runs, which would cause the caliper to be loose, knock around. It could cause you know, knocking on the vehicle whenever you brake. It's probably going to cause uneven pad wear. Hey, it's not good. It's failed the test. We need to replace it. Okay, so that's going to be the end of this video. We've stripped down the calipers. We've done an inspection of the seals, the sliders, the piston, the square section seal, the dust seal, We've checked the bleed nipples to make sure that they're free for when we come to rebleed it later on. That's about it really. So I'll just get all this lot cleaned up and I'll order a couple of new pistons and some new seal kits, and then you can watch the next video which shows you how to reassemble a brake caliper with all the new bits and pieces on board. So there you go. Thanks for watching. I hope you found that helpful. My name is Andy Young and I'm one of the lecturers down at Unitech, and I teach automotive. Unitech's based in Auckland, New Zealand. Thanks for watching. Cheers.